first and then move forward to anything else. So he's just being a little bit political, as he is, you know, as...
But he's paying tribute.
But hold on, he said, you know, he's paying
That's not...
tribute.
No, he didn't say sorry.
No, he's paid tribute to the very brave British soldiers.
That's just getting away.
And it's very, very important that we keep this special relationship with the US. I'm sorry, we have to accept what he said. For Donald Trump to say that, I'm very happy he has.
I just want to clarify something as well, that he said NATO soldiers. So he didn't specifically say which countries, so NATO soldiers, he said some of them were a bit back. Hang on, sorry, I'm talking. Some of them were a bit back. So what it is that there were some NATO countries that didn't step forward, but there were others, like the United Kingdom, like Denmark and many others, who did step forward and who were on the front line. So he doubled down on one part of it and is now paying tribute to the British soldiers. So he's acknowledging. So it was very... There's an apology in the sense that it kind of needs to be had, because he did not acknowledge those who had lost their lives and all the sort of people who have come back from that country in poor condition after it. But he is now at least paying tribute, so I'm
very pleased he's done so.
But you also said that Starmer, can't do much, but this just shows after the phone call with Trump, this actually happened.
He had a lot more pressure then from Starmer.
But certain things are done through Starmer and the government at this very moment, whether you like him or not. In opinion polls, you have to understand that this country is stable in many ways with their allies, and they're keeping strong, which, at the same time, we have to acknowledge that too.
I think you're giving Keir Starmer way too much.
Well, so are you with Trump?
Well, I'm not. Starmer has actually said our soldiers were brave, and as Nana said, he sometimes speaks without thinking. We know what Trump does.
Please.
No, I'm not making excuses. What he said was absolutely disgraceful. But he's come back and said that, and I'm very pleased he has. Please don't give Keir Starmer any credence. He's got nothing. He's weak. He's a weak man, or else he would actually not give us just cheap words. He'd actually act on it and help us.
But some might say that part of it now, there was a lot of pressure internationally. Even Greg Svensson, who is the chair of the Republicans overseas, made a comment saying that what Donald Trump had said is wrong.
Yep.
Everyone has acknowledged that what he said was incorrect.
It was incorrect.
Totally wrong. In fact, this is what Keir Starmer, because you said Keir Starmer deserves a lot of credit. These were the fighting words from Keir Starmer.
I consider President Trump's remarks to be insulting and frankly appalling. And I'm not surprised they've caused such hurt to the loved ones of those who were killed or injured.
And if you missed it, that these were Donald Trump's comments.
Always said, will they be there if we ever needed them? And that's really the ultimate test. And I'm not sure of that. I know that we would have been there, or we would be there. But will they be there? And let's hope that that never happens. We've never needed them. We have never really asked anything of them. They'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They stayed a little off the front lines. But we've been very good to Europe and to many other countries.
Yeah, so I mean, it was just totally wrong, wasn't it, really? Because actually the first time Article 5 was triggered was via the United States and, of course, for Afghanistan. So he's wrong there. And, of course, there were many NATO troops from different countries who didn't stay a little back, who were on the front line, like the British troops. But there may have been some countries in NATO who did not come forward as the British, the Danes and the others did. So there is a slight element of truth to some of it. But the fact that he was totally wrong.
Oh, he's totally
wrong.
And I said he was totally wrong, and it was disgraceful and highly insensitive. And as I say, I work for a lot of the charities for the armed forces and veterans, and I know how upset and hurt they were and painful those words were to hear. But he has come and said what he said.
But it's not about how you feel about Trump.
Soldiers are very brave.
But it's
and
about
I'm sorry,
how the
Keir
soldiers...
Starmer gives cheap words.
No, he doesn't. Not all the time. Whether you're a fan or not, you have to give credit where it's due. And at the same time, he has got a strong alliance and a relationship with Trump. And at the same time, we have to understand it is not just about you and I having these opinions. It is, again, about looking and seeing what those veterans think about Trump's, comeback on this. And do they accept it? Do they feel that it's been recognised? Is this the actual, comeback that they want? I don't know.
All right. Well, listen, if you just joined us, just to remind you, reiterate the breaking news, Donald Trump has paid tribute to the very brave British soldiers who served in Afghanistan after claiming that non-US troops had not been near the front line. Well, joining me now is political commentator Matthew Stadlen. Are his comments enough?
I'd like to see, Nana, and good afternoon to you and everyone, I'd love to see a proper, full and frank apology. Obviously, I mean, it's crazy that we're even having to say this, but we welcome the president's words, because what he said originally in that clip that you showed was truly outrageous. I do think actually it was a big moment for Keir Starmer, because he's tried the softly approach with Donald Trump. As Lizzie says, it's incredibly important that we have a strong relationship with America from a defense point of view and from a trade point of view. Both of those elements are under threat at the moment because of the quite remarkable behaviour, the erratic and irresponsible behaviour of Donald Trump. So Starmer's got to walk a tightrope, and this was the first time he really called him out, basically by name, and said what you've just said about our forces, our incredibly brave servicemen and women, is just totally out of order. It's appalling. And so praise to Starmer for that. But that doesn't mean we throw everything out of the pram. We've still got to take a pragmatic and responsible approach to our relationship with America, call out Trump firmly and fairly when he behaves like that. But it doesn't mean that we are no longer allies with them, because we are.
And of course, Keir Starmer wasn't the only one to call him out. Pretty much everyone called him out. So, and it was clearly, what he said was clearly completely inaccurate. There was just no hiding place for those words. So he really did have to clarify what he was saying. But he did use the umbrella word of NATO, which would then, that's why I guess he kind of gets away with specifically referencing the different countries that actually stepped forward. And the United Kingdom, of course, were absolutely one of those. So given that, do you think, just looking at how he's spoken out, Keir Starmer, now we've got a sort of half acknowledgement from Donald Trump, that Keir Starmer giving the previous breaking news that Keir Starmer has improved his prognosis against a potential leadership challenge from Andy Burnham?
Well, the Andy Burnham stuff is big news, unfortunately, and it shouldn't be. Andy Burnham needs to, of course, absolutely fine to go back to the Commons, and if he's prepared to be a team player, then he could be an asset to the Labour government. He could be an asset to the country. But if he's going to be on manoeuvres, and I'm not in his inner circle by any means, and I'm not privy to any WhatsApps that he may be sending or may not be, if he's going to be on manoeuvres, I think that is deeply irresponsible. Keir Starmer led a Labour Party that won a landslide majority just a year and a half ago. We all know it was a shallow majority, but it was nonetheless, under our democratic system, a massive majority. And Starmer needs to be allowed by his own side to get on and deliver. And he has delivered in some ways, but he's also made mistakes. It is his responsibility to drive forward the change and the improvement in our country that he promised us. And we don't want any side issues of leadership challenges. We saw the absolute chaos that took place in the Tory party in the final years of their administrations. Of course, many former Tory MPs now have been imported into reform. Labour should avoid that like the plague. Now, if Starmer doesn't, and I've said this before, Nana, if Starmer doesn't turn it around sufficiently in the next couple of years, then at that point, of course the party has to get real. We know that Nigel Farage is a very real threat to the Labour Party, despite the fact that he's showered Donald Trump with praise in the past, and I think his friendship with Trump could prove toxic with the British electorate. Nonetheless, he's obviously done extremely well in the polls, and Starmer and Labour are acutely aware of that. Now is not the time, Nana, for division. It is the time for coming together, and if Andy Burnham wants to introduce his undoubted talents to the Labour team, fantastic. But if he's going to be a divisive figure, then that's a very serious problem, and it's one that Starmer's team should reject. Now, do I think he should be allowed to stand? Of course I do, because if he does it, that would be ridiculous for the government to overrule, effectively the government, really the NEC, but Starmer's allies, to overrule local democracy. That would be absurd, and it would also be politically very damaging to Starmer. So there is a huge onus now on Andy Burnham, who says he wants to stand, to behave in a respectful and decent way and get on board with trying to drive the change this country desperately needs.
Now, I want to just bring you to the Chagos deal, because it would appear that President Donald Trump, and Keir Starmer alluded to this in Prime Minister's questions, that Donald Trump was using the Chagos deal to sort of leverage and put pressure on him with regard to sort of Greenland. Is Keir Starmer wise to continue with this avenue of the Chagos deal, given that he's managed to get Donald Trump to step back and actually praise the British soldiers, to acknowledge them. Is he wise now to perhaps work a little bit more closely and perhaps not consider giving away Diego Garcia?
Well, I think Trump has behaved immensely irresponsibly and erratically on this, because I direct viewers to what Marco Rubio, Trump's own Secretary of State, the Americans' equivalent of our Foreign Secretary, said in May of last year. He welcomed the Chagos Island deal. Now, we might all have our views on the Chagos Island deal. We might think it goes over the heads of some of the Chagos Islanders themselves. We could debate and discuss that, and rightly so. But as far as the Americans are concerned, they made it explicitly clear more than half a year ago, Nana, that this was a deal that they welcomed. For Trump now, apparently in his fit of pique, in his extraordinary and erratic behaviour that he's been showing the world in the last few days, for him now to turn his back on that deal and to talk in terms of Britain as apparently a great ally is deeply offensive. It's hugely undermining of the alliance, which, as I've already said, as Lizzie says, is very important. It's massively disrespectful to our Prime Minister that we elected this Labour government, after all. That's how our democracy works. So I think it's hugely irresponsible. Should Starmer press ahead? Well, that's partly going to rely, I think, on the legalities, because this 1966 treaty that we're now learning about, if the Chagos Island deal turns out to breach that, and the Americans should have known that as much as we should have known that, but if there is a breach, then that clearly represents a problem and is going to need significant ironing out.
He'll need permission from America, I think, to actually adjust it. And given what's been going on and given the stability of that region, and I suspect the Americans may well want to use it as a base. They don't want any sort of worry that it could end up, they could end up beholding to China or Russia or anyone, that the UK probably its best bet. So having seen all of this breaking news, of course, Donald Trump praising the British soldiers, and of course now Andy Burnham coming forward, where do you think all of this leaves the Labour Party? Do you think that this will make them slightly more popular in the polls now?
Well, I did think it was rather an unseemly spectacle, Nana, to see the, I think, rather delayed response of reform figures coming out to condemn Trump over his remarks about our brave British servicemen and women. And I do think that Farage's relationship with Trump is potentially politically damaging for Farage. I think Starmer has steered a much more intelligent path in terms of that relationship. He's been much more cautious. So I'm not sure that there's going to be an immediate bounce for Labour, but if I were Farage and his team, I'd be a little bit concerned at the moment. You are hearing people talk about we've reached peak reform. That may not turn out to be the case, and Labour cannot take anything for granted. Don't forget, Labour are being challenged on the left as well as on the right. There's a real threat now in the form of Zach Polanski, and Starmer needs to reassure the base on his left as much as he does to address the concerns of people on the right. It's a really difficult process of triangulation. He's got a lot of hard work ahead of him, but he has done some good things. He's done important stuff with education, with breakfast clubs and so forth. NHS waiting lists are coming down. There are plans for growth. Whether we see it or not, that remains to be seen. But I think he needs to be able better to articulate his narrative, his story. What is the Labour government for? How is it going to make our lives better? If you can get to grips with that, then you can start making proper progress.
All right. Well, listen, thank you, Matthew Stadlen, for your thoughts. That is, of course, Matthew Stadlen, political commentator, with his views on all the breaking news. We've had quite